Hi, everyone, and welcome to All Things Dating and Relationships. We are super excited tonight to have with us, of course, my co-host Jeremiah. Say hello.
Hello.
And then we have Dawn Maslar, who is the love biologist. Welcome, Dawn.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about your topic, the neuroscience of love. I am so fascinated.
Okay, well, for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been researching love on a scientific point of view. I wanted to see what was happening in our brain that causes us to fall in love. So what I discovered is that there are certain neurotransmitters that come into play. And there's some build up, then we can fall in love. And when we fall in love, some of them actually drop and some increase. And that's what gives us that sensation of feeling we're in love. And I call that phase temporary insanity because it happens to our brain.
And we all know that's true.
Well, once I tell you what happens, you'll definitely agree. And then there is what I called long-term love. I actually broke down love into 4 distinct phases. There's attraction, which has nothing to do with love. It's just your body's way of telling you there's something important happening. Then there's a dating phase. That's where you can build up the neurotransmitters to fall in love. Then there's falling in love, which has a short time period. And then there's what's called real love, which is totally different. They're all distinctly very different phases, neurologically speaking and biologically speaking.
Can we talk about each one individually? Because as a matchmaker, I'm always trying to explain to people that initial attraction, that quote unquote chemistry, is not what makes or breaks the relationship. And so this is why it's so important to break it down. So tell us a little bit more about the brain chemistry and what goes on in attraction.
Okay, so for attraction, you get that feeling of butterflies, sweaty palms, dilated pupils. That's all caused by norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is a fight or flight hormone. So it's pretty much the same response as the person that you think is the love of your life walking in the room, or a big black bear that's about to eat you. It's the same response to the body. It's preparing you to fight or flee. And actually there's actually 4 F's. There's fight, flee, feed, and have fun. So your body's kind of getting ready to do something. But all it does is indicate that you should pay attention. That's it. It doesn't mean love. It doesn't mean anything else. It just means something important has happened. Here's the part of the problem. When people make the connection where they think they have to feel that feeling and they think that's love, they jump into a relationship. And for a woman to jump into a sexual relationship, she can set herself up to fall in love. And then if she falls in love, she goes into temporary sanity for a while. So we see couples where this happens. For example, Baywatch beauty Pamela Anderson and rocker Tommy Lee.
Yep.
They met and married within 96 hours of meeting. So they met on a Friday. By Monday, they were hitched. So they thought, oh, this feels wonderful. It must be love. So they got married. Here's the problem with that. Since it's a fight or flight response, in order to get that same feeling going, you have to keep triggering that response. It also feels like adrenaline. So you end up going into these dramatic highs and lows in a relationship to keep that feeling going. And so there are these drama-filled relationships. So after about 3 years, Pamela Anderson filed for divorce and for a restraining order and charges against Tommy Lee. He spent 4 months in county jail for assault charges. But because they thought it was real love, he got out and they decided to try it one more time. He was quoted as saying, "We only tried it 800 times, 801, here we come." Now here's the big issue. Here's the big problem. I mean, they eventually divorced, we all know. The big problem is during those 3 years, they produced 2 children. And those two children saw their parents doing this on-again, off-again relationship thing. Some people believe that your relationship map, your love map, is created in the first 12 months of your life. And if that's true, those children are going to grow up to be doing the same thing, having the on-again, off-again relationship, the high dramas. So that's really the sad part of it.
And so basically what you're saying is you're using them as an example of a relationship that stayed in just the attraction phase.
It's an example of a relationship that believed in love at first sight.
Okay.
So they made the mistake of thinking that the attraction was actually love. Now, Pamela Anderson probably fell in love. I'm not sure if Tommy Lee did, but once you start introducing sex into a relationship, a woman's more likely to fall in love. When that happens, certain parts of your brain shut down, particularly the ventral medial prefrontal cortex. That's the part of your brain that judges the other person. That's why they say love is blind, because you lose the ability to judge them for a certain period of time.
Right.
So that's part of the problem with that. You're basically kind of, first you're jumping into a relationship, you're thinking the drama is love, then you can't judge anymore, and you're also turning off your amygdala, which is your part of your brain that sounds the alarm. So that's shut off. So even if you notice something that's like you should be paying attention to, you don't really pay attention to it because that part of your brain is now shut down.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then we move into the dating phase.
Mm-hmm. I just did a whole TED talk on this. So what happens when you start dating is you build up neurotransmitters. For both people, one of them is dopamine. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter of excitement, gambling. It's also part of the neurotransmitter of passion. For women to fall in love, it appears to be a combination of dopamine and oxytocin. She gets some oxytocin when she kisses, cuddles. As she learns to trust a guy, she gets a big, huge amount if she has an orgasm. So that's why it's a risk for her to fall in love with sex. Here's the thing. Men don't fall in love that way. Again, men need the dopamine. And the dopamine there is something called the Coolidge effect. Have you ever heard of that?
No, please explain.
The President Calvin Coolidge, the story goes, President Calvin Coolidge was on a tour of a chicken farm. So he's on this chicken farm and and his wife is with him, and his wife is up ahead. And she looks over and she sees this rooster, and he's kind of having his way with this hen. And she turns to the attendant and she goes, "My, is that rooster like that all the time?" And the attendant says, "Yes, ma'am, all day, every day." She goes, "Really? You have to tell President Coolidge that." So the attendant runs back and he says, "President Coolidge, your wife wanted me to point out this rooster to you." And he looks over and the rooster's having his way with this hen, and he says, "I see, son. Is he like that all the time?" And the attendant says, "Yes, sir, all day, every day, sir." And he goes, "That's what I thought, son." He goes, "Let me ask you one more question." The attendant says, "Yes, sir." And he says, "Is it the same old hen every day?" And the attendant says, "No, sir, it's a new hen every day." And the President Coolidge says, "Now run back and tell Mrs. Coolidge that." The moral of that story is that's where it became the Coolidge effect. That's how that got the name, was that from that story. Mm-hmm. What we can see is if we take a box of female rats and we throw a male rat in, he'll have his way with all the females until the point of exhaustion. And then he'll flop over in the corner and they can try to entice him and lick him and everything. And he will stay passed out. He won't do anything unless I throw in a new rat. And if I throw in a new female, he's up and at him. And that's the problem with dopamine, is that when you introduce sex into the equation, it can go up and down rapidly because as soon as it gets satiated, it goes back down again.
That makes sense.
So with a man, you have the concern with the dopamine, with the Coolidge effect when it comes to dopamine. The other thing for a man to fall in love is he needs a little boost of testosterone. Now he gets that normally when he sees a woman he's attracted to. You know, he's like, whoop, you know, hey. That we talked earlier about pheromones, and there's certain pheromones like copulins, human copulins. If it's in the air and a man walks past a woman ovulating, that's when she produces copulins. He'll give him a natural boost of testosterone. You know, like all of a sudden he'll be paying attention. So we get that normally. And then the other thing is vasopressin. Vasopressin is very similar to oxytocin, but it's a little bit different. Vasopressin is increases in a man when he becomes sexually excited. But here's the thing. It decreases rapidly when he has an orgasm. So unlike oxytocin that increases in a woman when she has an orgasm, vasopressin decreases when he has an orgasm. It only increases and stays elevated when he's thinking about sex but not getting it.
Interesting.
So
you can totally see now why it's so different between how men and women fall in love.
Right. Yeah, so if you want, so a man's more likely to fall in love when he doesn't get sex, and a woman's more likely to fall in love when she has sex.
Interesting. Now I see here that one of the other things you talk about is the true love.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about what happens to our brain there.
Well, let me back up for a second, because after that was the dating part, was where they build up. Now, once you fall in love, that's where I call temporary insanity. Hi, Jessica. Temporary insanity is when, or falling in love. So what happens when you fall in love? Those neurotransmitters build up, and then they reach a tipping point. And in that tipping point, we see a whole bunch that happens. One of the things that happens when you fall in love is that your serotonin, well, let me ask you, I'm going to put it as a quiz. The serotonin is the hormone of happiness. What do you think happens when you fall in love? Up or down? Goes up?
Up, up, up.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremiah, you agree?
The levels, yeah, I say they go up.
Okay, no. And serotonin plummets. Serotonin, the hormone of happiness, plummets. You think you're happy, but you're not. It plummets to the level of someone, or can plummet to the level of someone with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. That's why you're so obsessed when you fall in love. Like, did he call? Did he text? Did he call? That one?
Mm-hmm.
So then there is cortisol. That's the stress hormone. Up or down? Up. Jeremiah says up.
Absolutely.
How about the ladies?
Well, I don't know. Welcome, Jess. Do you have an opinion here?
Wait, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. This is her new platform, so I wasn't sure how it worked. So say it again. You say the women's serotonin levels. What happened?
Both people. Serotonin plummets, but now cortisol, that's the stress hormone. Up or down when you fall in love?
Okay, so then up, because you're like scared of losing it.
True. It is up. You got it. Cortisol skyrockets. But here's the thing. Remember I told you parts of your brain shut down? The part of your brain that's the amygdala, that's how I taught my brain. Here's your amygdala. Your amygdala is a part of your brain that registers alarm. But because that's shut down, your cortisol level's high, but you don't really feel it. You're nervous, you can't eat, you can't sleep, but it feels great, you know, and then you're obsessed, you're just a nervous wreck. And then your oxytocin level goes up in both of them. And that makes you feel more amorous. You're kissing and cuddling and all that stuff. Okay, so here's the big question. A man's testosterone Up or down?
I think up.
Okay, Jess says up. Jessica says up. Jeremiah?
I don't know. I want to say up, but I would say in past experiences, I'd almost say down.
Okay. What do you think?
I'm going to go with down on this one based on what your previous comment was.
Correct. It is down.
Mm-hmm.
It is down. It drops. When a man, it drops when he falls in love or when he commits to exclusivity to a woman. And when it drops, it makes him more susceptible to oxytocin, the bonding hormone. Testosterone blocks oxytocin. So it also makes him more likely, more compassionate, more gentle, better for like if they become a parent, because he's a little more cuddly. He's a lot more cuddly.
Now, Dawn, obviously I've done a little bit of research on this, with my 20 years in the industry. And one of the things that I always recommend for dating and the bonding experience is that they do some type of what I call excitement dates, bonding dates where there's a thrill, an adventure, a roller coaster, if you will.
In the beginning or later?
I'm sorry?
In the beginning or later?
In the beginning for bonding.
So what you're trying to do, that's not for bonding. That is called, what is it called? It's a misattribution of attraction.
So one of my secrets just got blown.
Yeah, misattribution of attraction. So are you familiar with the study? The bridge study? The famous bridge study? Okay.
Let's share that, if you will.
Okay, so there's a famous bridge study was done in 1972. They took a couple guys and they put them on one of these high bridges that had the low rope and the rickety, and the one over top of the river with the jagged rocks underneath, and it's like scary. And they have them go out there, and about halfway through, they have this woman come out and start asking questions. And then they do the same experiment on a low-lying bridge where nothing would happen. It's like a little babbling brook. You could never get hurt. Couldn't even stub your toe on. And they followed up to see which ones called that woman, because the woman gave them their phone number, how many phone calls they got from the men for the woman. And they discovered that it was, I can't remember the exact number, but it was like it was something like 50% on the scary bridge and like 20% on it was this astronomically different number. It's like a huge difference. And what it basically was saying was that fear, because we know that fear creates adrenaline, which is the cousin from norepinephrine that we talked about earlier about attraction. So it feels to your body like it's attraction. And that's called misattribution of attraction. It's not attraction. You are basically, you are taking fear and thinking that it's attraction. It's also the principle behind the old, what is it called? The tunnel of love. The tunnel of love was a ride that was a dark ride, and they'd have like scary people pop out, and you'd get scared. By the end, you were in love with the person you rode with.
Right. So someone knew what they were doing.
Yes, exactly.
I love it. Well, tell us a little bit more, Dawn, about, where the brain shuts down in love. I know this is really big, and I want to exaggerate it a little bit, if you would give me that pleasure, because I do believe, especially with what Jessica and I do in matchmaking, sometimes we see a lot of that because we work with people all the time and doing the matchmaking. And there's a difference between the real love and the brain love we're talking about. So can you just really drive that one home for us a little? Okay.
I'm going to pull my brain back out. I knew I'd use my brain. So here's your brain. Here's your prefrontal cortex. That's the front of your brain. That's the thinking part. Mm-hmm. We know that researchers at Linden University discovered that you lose cognitive ability when you fall in love. So you have a slowing down of your prefrontal cortex. Right behind your prefrontal cortex is the ventral medial prefrontal cortex. We know that there is a deactivation of that area. That area is what you use to judge the other person. So now that's the love is blind. You can't really see them for who they are. But we love it so much because we also stop judging ourselves. So our third grade teacher that said we're terrible at math is gone. all those voices that got down on us and that, oh, you should have known better, they're all kind of gone for a while when you fall in love. So it feels great. You lose the amygdala, the sound and the alarm. So even if you found something, let's say the guy has a sawed-off shotgun and a ski mask in his trunk and you notice it, it doesn't register you as a problem. You're like, he says, I do winter deer hunting. And you're like, oh, isn't he wonderful? You praise him for his conservation efforts because it's not registering anymore because your alarm system's not working. We also lose part of our parietal lobes. The parietal lobes are right here. This is a half a brain, so you don't really see the parietal lobes. But the parietal lobes are right here. So these are associated with selfishness. So the reason why that they're probably deactivated, well, the reason why they all deactivate is because the whole purpose of falling in love is to get you closer to another person. So the selfish parts of your brain deactivate, which makes sense. You're going to be more, it takes your me and turns it into a we. Mm-hmm. So you become more concerned with the other person. We also lose parts of the temporal lobes. And basically you're losing parts of your brain that are concerned with yourself. So at the same time we talked about those neurotransmitters, another one that increases is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. We know that helps with neophobia, the fear of new people and new places. So it's all kind of orchestrated to get you closer to another person.
And so you say that all of this has certain time limits, the shutdown of the brain and everything. Can you go over that kind of timeline for us?
Yes. It's between 1 and 3 years. Average is about 2 years. And then your brain starts coming back. And then all of a sudden those things you didn't notice before start showing up. And, those things that were charming all of a sudden become alarming. You never notice that he smacks his lips when he eats, or that he snores, or he just can't seem to pick up his socks. And you're like, where did that come from? And that's where a lot of times people go, oh, he changed, or she changed. And they didn't change. You just didn't see it before because you were in that in-love fog. And then that's where the true love really comes in. That's where we see another neurological shift. If you stay in love. The majority of the divorces in the United States occur right around that 2-year mark.
Mm-hmm. So what can people look at for their future to be able to spot this, recognize it, and follow through to the next stage of true love? Okay.
Well, they did a study and they looked at all the characteristics that people have that are in true love. And they looked at 40 different ones, and they couldn't find any that were similar except for one. And that was the ability to maintain positive illusions of the other. In other words, they practice love. They practice being loving. They practice looking at the characteristics that they initially loved in the other person. So they focused on the good, not necessarily the bad. So if you start focusing on the socks on the floor and the smacking of the teeth, you're going to end up driving a wedge into the relationship. And it's going to probably end up, what's going to happen is the stress and oxytocin usually balance out. When you're falling in love, you can have high oxytocin and high cortisol, but not after. After your brain chemistry starts leveling out, they become opposites. So as your cortisol level goes up, your oxytocin goes down. That means you're more likely to separate. The bonding starts wearing off. So you want to guard against that cortisol level, that stress hormone coming to it. The other thing is, sometimes now that you're in that relationship and you notice these things, women will sometimes want to fix or change him. And the problem with that is, every time you do something like that, time you try to correct him, you're basically sending the message that he is not good the way he is. He's not acceptable the way he is. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, it can cause him to start pushing up. And if his testosterone starts climbing up, then it blocks the effects of oxytocin. And the studies have found that that higher testosterone is predictive of divorce.
And I think too, Dawn, this is a really good point, because I always go back to saying that love is a choice. Mm-hmm. And I think at this stage, you're making a choice. Do you choose to love that person for who they are and without your quote unquote blinders on? Or do you choose to be the nag? Do you choose to let the relationship go? Are you going to fall into society's disposable relationship downfall?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a good analogy. I like that.
Mm-hmm. So this is really, really some good stuff. How can you break this down in, let's say, our terms, not so much the biology terms, to give us your 5 best points for dating, for when you're meeting someone and you're going through the dating process? What are some of the things that we need to be more cognitive to? What are some of the things that we need to pay more attention to while we're blinded by some of these?
Okay, well, you got to remember that these are 4 distinct phases. So the question that you have, the first question is, you asked about dating, but you're not blind yet. You shouldn't be blind yet. Okay, so you got to be cognizant in dating. Now, One of the biggest tips, or one of the things I do some coaching, I work with some women. One of the first things I do with a woman is I have them write down what they want out of life, and then what they want in a relationship. And I have them break it down to the 5 must-haves and the 5 deal breakers. Those are important, because if you get into a relationship and you start dating, and you do fall in love, your brain is going to be temporarily suspended, so it's not going to really be concerned with that. And you don't know how many times I've had women show up 2 years later, 3 years later, and go, I kind of knew when I first started to date him that this was not going to work, but I just went with it because they fell in love. They went into a sexual relationship, and then the differences really crop up after the brain comes back. So it's critical in the beginning to know what you want, what's important to you, what your deal breakers are. If you don't want somebody that does drugs, don't date somebody that does drugs, and you're not going to change him later. Or if you want to have children and he doesn't, you're not going to change him later. You're not going to change him. So I think that's the critical part for the dating phase. But there's other stuff for attraction. So it's important to figure out exactly, when you're talking about tips, what phase you're really in.
Right. And I think that's the hardest thing too, is because sometimes we're not even aware of these phases that we're in as we're going through it.
Correct. Yes. And like, for example, for attraction, I'll get women to say, how could I attract all these guys? Like, why do you need all these guys? Don't you just need one guy? Don't you just want to have a relationship? So, and what's attractive to a bunch of guys is not always going to be attractive to a relationship. I can get you to attract a bunch of guys. The chances of one of those guys falling in love with you are slimmer. Because if you really want to attract a bunch of guys, I put you in a low-cut blouse and a short skirt. But that's not going to get you to love. That's going to get you to attraction. So again, it's like, what do you want? You have to start off with what you really want. Now, some tips for attraction are, you probably already know these. What is the most sexually attractive color?
Red.
Red, correct. Very good. So if you're going to do online dating, you want to have either a red background or wearing a red shirt I usually wear a red shirt. I was blue tonight, sorry. So I'm not as sexually attractive. I got my red.
You got some red background.
Yeah, I got red in the background, so I'm okay. And then ways to enhance your online profile. You want to do left cheek exposure. For a woman, you want to smile. For a man, does a man smile? Can you tell my professor? I keep asking you like you're my students. Okay, students, what's the answer? All right, so for a woman, we smile. Does a man smile?
I think so.
On an online profile.
No.
Shaking her head.
I didn't want to jump the gun, but no.
No, correct. Women, I'm a woman. I love women, but we're the worst. We are the worst. Research has found that what we say and what we do are two different things. Now, Jeremiah probably already knows this, right? He's not saying anything. He's just
sounds like a loaded question.
Yeah, exactly. So a woman will say, I really want a nice guy. But she will walk past the nice smiling guy and go for the scowling, brooding guy. The scowling, brooding guy is more attractive, sexually attractive than the happy guy. And not only that, she'll say, I don't see any benefit of marrying a guy with a Porsche. I'd rather marry somebody that's sensible that has like a Honda Civic. But if you put her to the test, you put that on paper, you put her to the test, she walks past the Honda Civic and gets into the Porsche.
Yeah.
So she's like more likely to date the Porsche guy, but more likely to marry the Honda Civic guy. But how does the Honda Civic guy get a date?
I guess he's stuck buying a Porsche.
But she doesn't want to marry a Porsche guy.
Mm-hmm.
She just wants to date him.
Mm-hmm.
I think another point to bring up here, Dawn, is, I see people with all ages throughout all the age groups. Mm-hmm. And I think that the older we get, the more aware of these things we become. And so sometimes for people who are going through the dating process at a later part in their life, if they've been in a relationship before for a long time and they've been out of the dating scene for a while, this may seem new. But for people that haven't, that actually have a little bit of experience dating, let's say 45 and above, this is more second nature. And I hesitate to use the word mature because it's not necessarily maturity level. I think it's more of an experience level. Would you agree with that?
Actually, I wouldn't. Sorry.
And yet,
she's gonna hate me. She's like, you get a little doll over there. You're putting pins in. I know. The problem with people that have been out of the dating pool and then try to get back in, they're not that well versed with dating. One of the things that I see a lot of is women need to indicate to a man that she's receptive. So she needs to say that she's attractive. But if you haven't dated in a long time, you forget how to do that. It doesn't come naturally. And you're so used to being nice that you automatically go back to nice. So you're walking down the street and you see a man you like and you smile at him and then you demurely turn away and you think you just told him you liked him. And he thinks you're just being nice. So you just, and it takes that, you've lost how to flirt. You lost the art of flirting because you had to turn it off because you were in a long-term relationship. You can't be doing that stuff when you're married. The other problem when you're married is that a man has a part of his brain called, okay, ready? Sexually dimorphic nucleus of the I'm sorry. It's called a pursuit spot. It's a sexually dimorphic nucleus of the hypothalamus. They call it the pursuit spot. It's 2.5 times larger in a man than it is a woman. It's what really, and it's sexually dimorphic means it's affected by testosterone. It's what gets him to get him to pursue you, to get him motivated. Part of the brain that gets him motivated. Sexually dimorphism is like the reason why he has bigger muscles and beard and all that stuff. So when he's been in a relationship for a while, remember I told you his testosterone drops. And that causes that part of his brain to shrink some, his pursuit spot. He doesn't need it when he's in a relationship. So when he gets out of the relationship, the part of his brain that should be telling him to go is not really there. It's not really working right now. So combined with the fact that he doesn't really know to pursue, or he doesn't have the impetus to pursue as much, and she's not signaling receptivity, there's a lot of problems. They're both going, I want to date, but nothing's happening. It's like this, awkward stalemate. So for what I tell for women, they need to indicate receptivity. Oftentimes, one of the big one is the 3-second rule. So that smile, when she first looks at him and turns away, that's 1 second. But if she can hold that gaze for 3 seconds, it sends a signal to his little pursuit spot that she's interested. And it's actually more difficult than it sounds. But what I shouldn't do is I show him, I'll say, take a look at him, smile, look up and down, back at his eyes, smile, and then pretend like you caught yourself. Ooh, too much, and then look away. That indicates that you're interested. And also online, you can go ahead and ask a question. Because a woman will like, I don't want to pursue. You don't want to pursue, but you need to indicate you're receptive. So you can go ahead and ask a question, but don't ask them out, or don't continue to ask questions. Just basically send them one question, and that's it. You'll know that if he's interested, he'll pursue. That make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think you probably misunderstood me, because that was my point, was the ones that have the experience are doing a little bit better than the ones that are coming back into it for the first time.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right, so then I gave you the science behind it.
Thank you. I love it. Jessica, I want to just give you a shout out. Thank you for jumping in here today. Of course, Jessica Bass from Fast Pass to Love. She's also a matchmaker friend of mine, and I'm sure you know Dawn.
Yes, I love Dawn's work. I'm so happy I could join. I had a client call and then it ended, so happy I could make it on here.
I'm glad you're here, Jessica. What area are you from?
I'm in Los Angeles, and I was living in Tel Aviv, Israel, for 5 years, and I started my business there with international dating and matchmaking, and now I'm here, and I have clients that even travel all over the world to look for their Jewish partner. So it's really it's a blessing. I feel so fortunate to be able to do it, and I started it as a hobby and grew to time like in the last year and a half.
Wow, fantastic!
Thanks.
Yes, so when you take your little tour out to California, Dawn, you're going to stop
on my list. I want to get to California.
Yeah, where are you, Dawn? What state are you in?
Florida.
Oh, okay, no, you have to come, and LA is big for relationship dating seminars, so we'll put something together. We'll talk later offline. You have to come.
Okay, I want to come.
Okay, good. And I'll take you to some TV tapings because I have some connections.
Oh, okay, fantastic. I'm in. I'm down.
Good.
I love it. Well, I do want to open this up if anyone wants to jump on and join us live on cam with any questions or questions in the comments, feel free to do so. And then Dawn, I do also want to mention that you do have your book coming out, which is scheduled for release October 18th, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you want to tell us a little bit more about your book, Men?
I got my giant book.
You got your giant
Wow.
It's called Women Choose, the neuroscience of meeting, dating, losing your mind, and finding real love, or true love.
Excellent.
And I mentioned that if it's in pre-order now on Amazon, and we said mention for a free gift. If anybody buys it on pre-order, for the first 4 people that buy it, I will give them a 20-minute consultation, 20-minute coaching session.
Yes, and you can find the link to pre-order Dawn's book right on my website where we are broadcasting live. So if you look under her picture, you'll see a little red button that says pre-order now.
Fantastic. Just send the receipt to lovebiologist@gmail.com and we'll set you up.
Can you repeat that one more time, please?
The receipt, send a receipt to, you may type it on here, lovebiologist@gmail.com.
I will do that in the comments below the video because this one is just ours. Okay, well, Jeremiah, you've been kind of quiet tonight, which is unusual. We typically get a great guy's point of view out of you. Do you have any comments you want to toss out there?
Yeah, I was just kind of taking everything in. There were some great points made, and definitely some things that what's going on.
Clarissa's trying to jump in here. Let me just mute Clarissa real quick.
She got some music on or something, I think.
There we go. I just muted Clarissa for a minute. All right, go ahead, Jeremiah.
Yeah, well, usually you ask me if I have any points or views, so I was waiting for that, just kind of waiting for an open door. Yeah, I think the first thing that stuck out of my mind is when she's talking about the dating phase and just how you're less focused on yourself and you're more focused on the other person. I mean, that tends to be me as a whole. I mean, my love language is active services anyway, so I always try to focus on the person and what I can do to really gain their affections and attention and things of that nature. But I do notice after a certain amount of time, especially if it's not starting to be reciprocated, that you do start to lose that focus on the person and you start focusing more on yourself. So that's got to be that whole chemical transition, like what she was talking about, which I find pretty fascinating and can obviously confirm that. So that was the first thing that popped out in my head when she was speaking about that. And then the other thing that you said was, me and Denise have this conversation all the time. You're talking about how in the online dating scene where a girl, it's okay for a girl to ask questions, because it seems like 9 times out of 10, when I'm talking to somebody online back and forth, it feels more like a one-sided interrogation instead of a conversation, because I feel like I'm the only one asking any questions. And it really makes me feel like the other person's not that really interested. They're either just kind of pacifying the situation or they have no idea how to conversate. So that's a good point to bring up as well. But, kind of let them know it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to, inquire about the person that you're supposedly taking an interest in.
Right. I find it sometimes, or I've had people say it's almost like 2 extremes. Either they feel like they're in a job interview, or the other person's like pretty quiet. You don't get like the middle ground sometimes. Yeah,
actually, if it goes about 3 or 4 times back and forth where I'm the only one asking the question, I actually say, so, do you have any questions for me? Because I feel like this is a one-sided interrogation, just to kind of lighten it up, and then I can kind of get a feel for, oh yeah, they know how to conversate, or they have no clue. And I've actually had people just stop communicating after that. And I'm like, okay, well, that's fine, But I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with today's technology and people really not knowing how to communicate. They hide behind their devices, and it's also a very me-centered world as well. So it's always about you instead of the other person. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I think a lot of women just will get into the routine of answering, but they feel obligated to answer, but they don't go back and forth with the conversation.
Right.
Yeah, and then, Dawn, I wanted to bring Clarissa on for a minute here. Hi,
Clarissa.
I went ahead and muted her. Clarissa, you need to unmute yourself one more time because your YouTube or something kept going.
Oh, no.
Clarissa sounds
like on high speed. You have it on high speed. Your voice is sounding like you're sucking helium.
All right, she muted herself again. Oh, too bad. Well, Clarissa's going to be joining us next week on all things dating and relationships. Clarissa Silver's a behavioral scientist, so I thought it would be interesting for her to jump on the tail end here with you. Clarissa, you want to try your volume again?
Maybe gets rid of the link and comes back.
Gotta love technology.
Maybe she could type the question or say something.
Yeah, but anyway, Clarissa, I wish that would have worked. We'll have to get you back on. And then, David, you want to join us for a question? I see you jumped on here. Oh, I guess David's going to be shy.
Is David? I think it's frozen, it looks like.
Yeah, it looks like it. I think maybe we could be on information overload on the wonderful World Wide Web tonight.
Yes, that could be.
Yes, lots of good things going on. Well, Dawn, do you want to go ahead and...
David doesn't speak English.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Well,
I understand.
I don't know what you speak, David, but I don't think I can translate. All right, well, we've got a few minutes left. Jessica, of course, from Fast Pass to Love, thank you again for joining us. Jeremiah, of course, my co-host, and Dawn Maslar. If anyone is interested in her book, please feel free to look right underneath the video for, or actually it's above the video, for the pre-orders, which is coming out on October 18th. And Dawn, is there, a few minutes of advice you can just give us in general before closing out?
Well, I wanted to say one other thing before we go. Because of the release of the book, I've got a lot of stuff that's going on. If you want to check out my website at dawnmaslar.com. I've got lots of events, and some of them are, I got like another TED Talk coming up. I've got a show called The Great Love Experiment. I'm coming to Houston. I've got one in Miami. I've got some book signings. So I got a lot of fun stuff that's coming up if you want to check it out on my website.
Yes, and I am very interested in this love experiment. We'll have to talk more offline about that.
It's really fun. You're basically taking all the peer-reviewed research and putting it on stage, so we see how pheromones attract, what's attraction, what's exciting in attraction, what happens to your brain when you fall in love, and we kind of reenact it out on stage so you can kind of watch what's going on. Reenactment is a way to broach the subject and talk about it. So it's a fun way to do it.
Wonderful. Well, we'll be crossing our fingers that you come up here to Destin sometime soon.
I would love to. Like I said, I have a friend in Niceville.
Yes.
He's got a room for me to stay in, his family. So.
Yes. We could actually bring Clarissa down as well, because she's not too far. And have the scientists get together here on the beat.
Oh, that would be fun. That would be very fun.
Yes. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for a great discussion tonight. Much appreciated. If you have any questions, you can toss them in the comments below, and I will be responding to those comments throughout the evening. And Dawn, again, wonderful conversation. I really appreciate your time. And I hope to be seeing you in person soon.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be here.
Oh, you're so welcome. Well, everyone have a good night. And if you missed any part of this, because I know a few of you dropped on a little bit late, you can always watch the replay on MatchMakerLive.com.